Good morning, all. Welcome to season one of Behind the Data. My name's Jez Clark. I'm one of the co-founders of Eden Smith, and I'm very, very happy to be introducing Simone Steel, the former Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Nationwide Building Society. How are you, Simone?
Hi, Jess. I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. I've been really looking forward to this. Looking forward to meeting you because we haven't met before. But no, I'm quite excited about the conversation because I'd like to get your view on our topic of this season, which is building sustainable data teams. As you know, I've just mentioned I've got a few views on that. I think there's a lot of default to recruitment, which I don't think is the right strategy, and I'm keen to understand how you go about that. So yeah, welcome to the show. Let's just talk
Thank you.
about how did you initially get into the industry?
I think I was very lucky, first of all, because back in the 80s, I went to a technical college
Okay.
in data processing, of all
Oh, right.
things.
Right.
And that was back in Brazil, where I'm originally from. I grew up there and had quite a lot of my professional life there in São Paulo. And this data processing course was actually the seed of computer science and
Right.
computing as an academic topic in those days.
Right.
Most people who were programmers in that day and age were mathematicians, statisticians, physicists, who could only do their jobs enabled, their research and
Hmm.
progressing their field with the aid of kind of compute power.
Right.
So I entered as an apprentice, actually, in programming, and my first job was actually an assembler programmer for mainframes for a software
Wow.
company. And so
You
very lucky that I
yeah.
caught the beginning of that wave.
Yeah, God.
Um, and
Assembler.
further, assembler, yeah, well, there weren't many options at the time. You're either COBOL or an
COBOL or
assembler.
yeah.
There may be, I actually learned programming Fortran, which
Right.
makes me, it sets my mind back to the hidden figures and the dawn on Fortran in the 60s, maybe.
Yeah, wow.
um, so I feel that I had a really, I grew up with the
Hmm.
technology change, and I grew up with the evolution of computing and data processing, which is still very close
Right.
to my heart. Yeah.
Right. Okay, yeah. I mean, you did mention some technologies there that I remember when I first got into recruitment, because I was placing lots of COBOL developers and RPG 400 programmers coming up to the year,
Yeah.
the millennium issue that we had, and everyone thought the world was going to end, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
um, so as part of your career then, because obviously you've had, I mean, there's 18 years at a senior management and executive level
Mhm.
that you have in your background. Was there a pivotal moment in your career that kind of springboarded you to where you are today?
Yeah, there have been several, right? You don't go from like the programmer to the CDAO, as it were,
No.
unless you go through some very tortuous roads and unpredictable paths. So from a very, very technical engineering, a software engineering um, kind of profession, I had a few twists and turns. First, moving from Brazil to the UK and learning how the discipline of managing large data sets was quite different.
Yeah.
I actually felt, from a skill point of view, the rigor that you have to demonstrate from changing from the software industry when you sell compute and data as a business to a captive IT person
Right.
working
Yes.
for a bank, you demonstrate very different levels of rigor in engineering and in data management. So I think that was the first pivotal aha moment
Mm,
for me to say, wow, data management in large banks it requires a little bit of an uplift of rigor.
right.
So that made me think in a more leadership kind of model. What are the skills? What are the capabilities that we need to foster
Yes.
rather than just the projects we need to deliver?
Yes.
So that was, I think, as a person, very a pivotal moment. And further down the line, I think to make me go from a technology professional to a data professional at a senior level, clearly there was a dawn of the CDO
Right.
in, say, maybe mid 2010s time,
Yes.
maybe between 2013 and 17. And I attended, I was working for Thomson Reuters in 2017, and our CEO, now CEO of Refinitiv,
Hmm.
David Craig, presented in one of the large Thomson Reuters events his prediction for where data was going to go in the future.
Right.
And he said, I see at least 80% of the chief data officers in the market being data scientists. And
Really?
that made me absolutely, and I will credit him for such foresight. He
Right.
saw where this was going, and he made me go back to studying. So I started in 2019 a formal data science professional certification with Harvard,
Okay.
and that's a pivotal moment because I realized that my degree in economics, statistics, econometrics of the 90s was actually what is the building block for data
Building block.
science,
Yeah.
for predictive modeling, for statistical rigor, for what we were trying to do with data.
Right.
Absolutely now enabled by accessible languages. I remember doing my first linear regression in the 90s using R.
You said there
You
was one,
can,
just about to get to one point.
so yes, in the R language in the 90s, we had one library, which
Yes.
was the linear regression library,
Right.
right? The minimizing of the risks, or minimizing of the errors, and the linear regression model. And now we have 250, oh, many more than that, different
Mm.
ways of modeling and predicting, and different ways of looking at accuracy and other properties of your predictions. So I felt, kind of a new wave of opportunities opening at that time.
Mm.
And then, of course, there was COVID and lockdown. So I decided to do one more course, which was, it's called the Tiny ML professional certification, which is back to my assembler days in a way, by getting models to run on tiny devices in the Internet of Things,
Yes.
and understanding how to minimize the footprint of your code in devices that are very constrained in memory and energy.
Right.
And I think that combination, there is the kind of early 2000s recognizing that the IT profession needed a bit more rigor, and this prediction from David Craig to say, if you are not fully understanding what data science can do for you as a leader, it'll be very hard to manage our emerging risks and see the emerging opportunities. So I think those two things define quite a lot of who I am now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a fascinating story. I'm sure the listeners will be really encouraged to hear, the journey that you took, and also your viewpoint on why having a background or understanding or the skill set for data science is so pivotal in the impact you can have on a business. One of the things you said was, moving or going from being a technology professional to a data professional. I mean, one of the biggest things that we realized when we set our company up was that it's a different type of skill set. If you were to narrow those skill sets down, I mean, I have my view on what are the really important skill sets to become a very good data professional. What would you say there's to say top three skills are that you believe people should have, or top five?
I believe that when we talk about data, we put too many things into one large bucket, right?
Hmm.
So there are many needs, I think, of data professionals. And I wish sometimes that we would recognize data governance as less negative, less of a risk mitigation career, and more of a stewardship career.
Yes.
Yeah, as a steward. So in terms of skills, I would love to be an intern in the British Library to understand how do librarians actually classify, index, store, care for
Yeah.
our data in an analog manner,
Yes.
and see how can we build digital librarians that care for data,
Yes.
that can, take away the stigma around data governance. So I think this is one absolute skill, the cataloging, the meaning,
Yes.
being able to find it without having to rely on ChatGPT or variations of search engines, right?
Yes.
Um, because those things are actually making up, they I guess, trying to address a problem that we created by not being very careful,
Hmm.
perhaps, with data. So that I think is number one,
Yes. A very
because
good
the
point.
other skills that we bring in terms of data, um, to make a business successful, to make, I guess, to advance our human condition with data in the science space, I think requires that statistical rigor.
Okay.
I think we can weaponize data quite easily by mistake, or maybe lack of awareness of impact in the real world.
Hmm.
And we haven't got yet our Hippocratic oath of medicine applied to data. I hear a lot, especially from our Alan Turing Institute, some
Yes.
partnerships with the People-Centered AI Institute launched by the University of Surrey recently. The ethics and people-centered thinking is at the, it has to be the core of the data professional.
Okay.
We need to care about, why is my model better having perhaps more false positives and less false negatives?
Yes.
What is the impact on the person that will be experiencing the outcomes of our data analysis or prediction? So I think, I know you asked for 3 skills, but I think these 2 for me are the predominant ones: the professional rigor and the ethics,
Mm.
but also the care and stewardship
Mm.
for data.
No, it's very insightful. And I definitely agree with your point around the stigma that data governance has. And I do wonder whether that's because of that's just kind of a knock-on effect from part of data governance was to deal with the issue of GDPR, which was quite a mundane thing, and it went on for a couple of years, and hence it's kind of, I don't know, it's not, it's sometimes seen as maybe the boring or not so exciting part of the data space, which I disagree with, and I agree with you, and I can have that, I can demonstrate that from having some interaction with CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Librarians and Information Professionals. You know them, I think, maybe. And I remember sitting in a theatre there, and there was a presentation being given, and I said to my colleague, and was my colleague that actually said it to me, Nick. He said, "We're surrounded by data experts. You know, like all of the people in this room could perform this role." And I'm really, really, and that's a different way of thinking. It's a little bit more out the box, but you're absolutely right. And for me, that's just an upskilling exercise which could help the talent pool, but also actually caring. So data ethics and caring, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
If people don't care, then of course it just adds to the problem. But no, thank you very much. So if we move on to, obviously I'm assuming that you've built a few teams in the past. let's let's be honest.
That's right.
Everyone has a different approach, and I see multiple. I see lots of different organizational design in businesses. I see lots of different talent strategies around data teams. I see a lot of data teams in IT teams, some separated, some siloed, some federated, like whatever that might be. What's your approach if you're, have you, I don't know if you've been in a greenfield site we've built from scratch, but what is your approach? Like, how do you go about building a team of data people?
I think the very first time I built it from scratch is so long ago that is worth very little for your audience.
Well, I think the listeners will
um,
be interested in anything you've got to say, if I'm honest, but no.
no, I like building from scratch is interesting and daunting,
Mm,
because you have nowhere to hide, right? You have nowhere to hide. So the first time I built one from scratch was still in the early 90s, so it's that long ago,
right.
where I was moving our software business from payroll and accounting services to telecommunications. That was pre-mobile, right?
Wow,
It
yeah.
goes back a long, long time. Is the time those days of subscription television, those days of pay-per-view. I don't know, remember those days?
Yeah, I do.
where where we had to integrate billing, and the fact that is a near real-time service, because if you want to watch a movie at that time, you needed to be decoding that movie at that time.
Yes.
So so there was a very intense period of looking for um, talent that would understand um, the encoding side, the workflow side, the billing side of things, because data is everywhere.
Yes.
And the idea that it is a discipline, I think, hinders our ability to move forward. The data professional label, I think, sometimes holds us back.
That's an interesting
Um,
point.
and I think data, and I learned a lot from working with people who came from, say, a geophysics background, where data about, you know, Earth movement, whatever that's called, our
Mhm.
seismic data,
Yeah.
is the core of their profession. So are they data professionals? We don't call them that. We call them geophysicists.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
the the course that I did with Harvard was run by a biologist. So he is a data professional. He understands, the power of AI when scanning for cancer cells in
Hmm.
an image,
Hmm.
right? So I think building from scratch is quite daunting, because you need to balance the ability, say, to build data pipelines and govern data electronically with the ability of using it properly for the subject matter that
Yeah.
makes your business tick.
Yes.
And to find that combination when it's going to be imperfect, makes you take quite a lot of risks. Some of
Yeah.
them work, some of they don't.
Yeah.
But more recently, what I've learned more is that upskilling is an ongoing concern, and you have to really harvest the interest of people who may not see themselves as data professionals. Very much
Okay.
as you were saying, being in the audience of that,
Yeah.
conference of librarians, and actually take a step back from the job spec, take a step back and say, what is the actual problem, and what is the gap that I might be able to close more quickly with training, with
Yeah.
mentoring, with peer. Is like a peer programming
Yeah.
concept
Yeah.
transposed to a data scenario.
Yeah.
And I think giving people tools and capabilities that it's easy, compared to giving them the understanding of dynamics of large data sets, understanding the risks of the tails of the distribution, the trade-offs,
Yes.
right, between what is good enough, what's good for business, what is within risk appetite. Those things are harder to train. They are very hard indeed.
I really like your
Um,
approach and your thought process around what is a data professional. I think that's one thing I think that the listeners will take away from this conversation already. And also the fact that, the data market and the jobs functions have been over innovated, in my opinion. So we have thousands of different job titles. And I think you're absolutely right to concentrate on stepping back, kind of slow down to speed up, and look at where you can make those finer moves in training, to just
one
kick that
thing
off.
that, yeah, I think one thing that encapsulates that, Jazz, is I have a brand new set of leaders that I had to welcome into my former employer Nationwide in the recent past, and there was one question that was intriguing for me. They looked at my department, very large group of people, over 500 people, and the question was, what does your team do, and how come we have so many? Right, 500 people. And I'm thinking, of course, we entered a transactional dialogue, and I explained the remit of this data department, which is huge. But my takeaway was, shouldn't everybody be a data professional?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, because we come in, Nationwide is a very established household name in financial services in the UK, but we don't produce cars, we don't move houses when we mortgage them, we don't do physical things. We deliver cash through cash points, but everything else is virtual.
Yes.
So everyone in our business, and I'm sure you can transpose this to many businesses, has a representation of real life in data. Therefore, everybody is a data professional. And I think it makes me now think about the question, those things you say, oh, I wish I had said that. That I wish that we created this passion for data in absolutely everybody in this organization.
Which is why it's so important that you want everybody to care about data, right? Yeah, because we get the whole business caring, then, we'll look after it a lot more. No, that's brilliant. So I guess, and there's a couple of things you mentioned there as well. You mentioned about providing the people that, people within the team that you're building around tooling. Are there any tools that or things that you did or used that you felt really helped you on that journey?
I don't think I am as wedded to any of the two as to mention them in this podcast.
Let's talk about maybe what they did, what those tools did.
Yeah, what do those tools what do they do for us? I think having a single place where people can feel it's a marketplace for data, where they can understand meaning. And it's another difficult word alongside governance, which is metadata.
Yes.
Right? The data about data. So I think having a platform that physically people can go into and identify that this is where data is understood was a great step forward. Whether it's a 2A or 2B, it doesn't matter, but it needs to be one.
Yes.
I think that's the crux of your question, right?
Yes.
You have to have a marketplace, a catalog where you can trust that is the best one that everybody would go to. Even if it's a very skinny version of your entire enterprise, it needs to be understood as a nucleus, and you have to get people trained because those tools are so flexible. They are so configurable. They are meant to fulfill needs of many industries. So if you are not trained properly, you end up with a bit of a scarecrow configuration that people hate. And if they hate it, they think is an obstacle, not a tool that can help them do their jobs.
Yeah.
So I think data catalog and marketplace is essential. The other area where I haven't found a single tool, because all providers, but there are very good providers out there that can help you build a data pipeline, which is really to automate quite a lot of your policies.
Yes.
When you are ingesting into the environment where you want to perform your analysis, whether it's advanced analytics or more traditional one-off ad hoc request response or traditional MIS, I think there is this beauty of encoding your data policies. You mentioned before GDPR. I deal all the time with BCBS 239 or the payments card industry standards. Those are complex. They are principle-based regulations and policies, that you can't have everybody in the organization doing checklists in their minds. You need to get them those rules into an automated fashion as you bring data in, so you know you can trust it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think culturally this could be quite hard to replace checklists and policy attestations and e-learnings with trustworthy encoded policies. But there are tools out there that can make it easier, you know, under the banner of data pipeline management.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And the sorts of team sizes that you had, and you mentioned a department of like nearly 500 people there. You know, I have questions all around, or I get lots of different opinions on the round of the importance of training and development. Lots of people will say that training and development is important. Um, but what's your view on that? Because I believe it strongly links to employee motivation and retention. And of course, if your retention's bad, we have a recruitment problem. And in case you know, and then it affects your culture and obviously a lot of time wasted and God knows what else. So, what's your view around employee training and development and how you dealt with motivation and retention in teams such as that size?
Yeah. So first, you know, what's in the team? There are quite a number of pockets and with very different needs.
Mm,
So there's a pocket around data science, and the needs are, I believe, around ethics and around being having hardcore skills always very sharp. You know, to be able to um, then create models and explain models that people can trust.
yeah,
So this is, I believe, in the forefront of being able to manage, understand, communicate, and manage risk of predictive models drifting over
yeah,
time with bad feedback loops, being able to test for bias, maybe with adversarial techniques. So there are like some really hardcore disciplines that are just emerging, and those teams need to have access to industry conferences, to
okay,
networks like AI research that is happening in the industry, and be connected, feel connected to that professional community.
yeah,
And there are the engineers that look after masses of warehouses, lakes, lake houses,
yes,
and the rest, right? So
yeah,
these are professionals that have a lot to learn and co-create those data pipelines I was talking about.
yeah,
You know, some may have had decades in their careers writing ETLs, right?
yes,
And well, just kind of make simple, writing transformation and heavy lifting of data from A to B,
yes,
and have always been doing that, have always modeled in a Snowflake or star schema, and you know they know how difficult it is to deal with those heavy data loads. But then there are neighbors that have been doing DevOps for the last 10 years, you know, since Accelerate and the Phoenix project was published. And you know, what can they learn from
yeah,
software engineering
yeah,
that can be applied? So bringing, and I think that is the key for upskilling, for constant learning, this culture of continuous learning. You really need to get the teams to mix a bit.
yes,
I think learning from a distance doesn't go as far as we hope. Um, so, you know, creating hybrid teams has been very successful in this space of data engineering.
yeah. I really love the fact that what you're doing there is identifying the actual needs of the team based on what their requirements will be to help them personally develop, because it links up with engagement, doesn't it? It gets them motivated and excited, and then they feel like they're actually going on a journey there. And of course, within the landscape which supports transformation, they're all different, like you say. So I actually like that. It's not something that I've heard from anybody else really, because a lot of people will just implement training across the whole team, and it's kind of the same for everybody, or they give them a platform and say go and use that. But yeah, I think you've done it yeah, I think what you're advising there is much more effective, and I can see a lot of
Yeah.
sense in that.
But you
Um,
need to take the steps, you need to take the conscious steps to identify what is the product
yes,
that resonates with that team,
yes,
that resonates with the clients, right? This language of data product has let me down sometimes.
yeah,
Say, well, what's she talking about, data products, right? But they are different outcomes. And I don't think we have a sophisticated language that is friendly to my sales team or my marketing team or my risk team. It is still something I'm learning.
yeah. Well, I think we're all on a learning journey all the time, aren't
Yeah.
we? I
Yeah.
know I certainly am. Um, very, very insightful, Simone. I really, really appreciate this. I think just for the new generation of talent, those the all those really excited people that are working so hard at the moment, the students and even an even younger generation. What would your advice be to them? What say biggest tip would you give? If you take yourself back to when you first got into the industry again, what would you advise our listeners did when they're getting a career in data?
Um, I that there is one thing that made me, I think, who I am from the early days, which I think nobody said, but they did it, right? So it wasn't a verbal advice; it was how they behave through their lives, which is if you have a technical capability to offer, don't ever put yourself in a box of that technical capability. Because our industry, information technology and data, um, is there for a reason, which is to make the outcomes either better, more reliable, more useful. So do not wait for requirements, right? I think that is my advice. Use your analytical and critical thinking brain,
Right,
because your technical expertise, of course, will be necessary, imperative, in fact. But getting someone to do the analysis for you and tell you what they want is a very dangerous thing. I
mm,
think we need to meet the need. We talk about people-centered AI. That's what is an alarm bell in my mind. Yeah,
mm,
the people-centered need, and how you are an incredible industry that can make things happen, but you cannot exempt yourself from responsibility of doing the right thing.
right,
And without understanding the problem, without being curious, you will have to hide behind the requirement or behind somebody else's, you know, I was told to do this.
oh,
And
right,
I'm learning, and I'm going back way back in time, but encouraged by this advice from having read a book by Christopher Wiley. He was the data scientist behind Cambridge Analytica when
yes,
he was very young. I think he was only in his early 20s at best. And for me, this encapsulates the danger of being very technically capable, very enthusiastic, but not being able to see. We don't
what's going
expect
on?
from very young people, right?
Right,
There are many other problems with that story, but clearly it's upon us to be curious and upon
yeah,
us to be, more than the technical capabilities we've acquired. It's a
curiosity.
long advice. Curiosity, right? Let's label that curiosity.
I think it's great. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And Chris Wiley was a brilliant example, a case study of where, someone with great technical capability got themselves into something that, you know, well, as we know what the outcome was. But no,
Yeah,
that's brilliant. I think because, we see a lot of the students coming out, they're learning a lot of stuff about data. They're getting very, very heavily technical, on the technical side, but they just don't have that curiosity. How we nurture that in someone, I guess, is a different question. Um,
yeah.
but Simone, we're coming to the end now. This has been a really interesting conversation. I'm definitely going to go back and to listen to this because I think I've learned a lot already from you. So I do really appreciate it, and I really appreciate you sharing. So much information. Just before we part company, just to get to know a little bit more about the personal side of Simone, can you tell me one thing you think the audience would be surprised to learn about you?
Well, you'll be surprised to know that I am rehearsing for my flamenco show with my local little flamenco troupe.
Oh, wow.
um, for a little local show to celebrate some of the young students that are now 18 and they're leaving the school, and we want to do a big celebration for them. So I love flamenco as an art form,
Amazing.
and now that my kids are getting a little bit older, I can indulge myself in going to classes and rehearsals and having fun
Fantastic.
that way. I
That's
bet this was
fantastic.
very, very unexpected.
No, that's brilliant. That's a great hobby as well. I bet it keeps you fit.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, look,
Very good.
yeah, thanks so much for today.
Now,
And
thank you, Jess, for having me. I really appreciate the
not at all.
curiosity, as the theme goes.
Yeah, I think we've landed on a very good piece of advice there for all the listeners that are getting into our industry. But wishing you all the best, and I look forward to catching up with you soon. And
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful day.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you,
Thank
Simone.
you very much.